Hello, everyone. My name is Jordan Farmer. This is the Uncommon Conversations podcast, and today's guest will be Bo Hopkins, a power lifter and a family man, from what I can tell. And we're going to be talking about all sorts of interesting things. So I hope that you will stay with us, and I hope that you will be entertained. Hopefully, he will be coming on soon. There we are.
How are you?
I'm doing great, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on.
I'm going to turn off the comments here just so there's no distractions. Anywho, so how are you doing today? You feeling good?
I'm doing great. Doing great.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, you're dialing in for a meet, right? You have competition soon?
I do. Here on September 11th in Coleman, Texas, I'm competing in the Pioneer Open.
Okay. So what is the Pioneer Open? Is it all related to Pioneer Day or Mormon stuff?
No, it's actually it's funny you say that. Yeah. No, it's actually a company called Pioneer Belts, and they make some of the best premier weightlifting, powerlifting belts and equipment in the world. And so the owner put together, he's a great guy. Bobby is his name. He actually put together this meet last year, and it was so successful, he's decided to do it again. So it's a great meet. So in fact, last year I got to see Dan Bell, which is arguably the best power lifter in the world right now, squat 1,000 pounds and deadlift over 900 pounds. I mean, it was incredible. Absolutely incredible. And he did it classic raw, not equipped.
That's terrifying.
Yeah,
I mean, that's awe-inspiring, but it's also just like, I don't know, like that you're a giant. You're moving into some other kind of human. You're not a human anymore at that stage, I feel like.
I know it.
You've graduated in some way.
Yeah. The nicest guy in the world. In fact, I was sitting next to him, and mind you, this is my first meet I've ever competed in. And I was sitting next to him, and it was hot. I was huffing and puffing. I was trying to wrap my knees. And he looks at me and says, need any help with that? So I said, no, I'm not going to ask Dan Bell to wrap my knees. But he's a great guy.
That's awesome. So you said you've only recently sort of started competing in powerlifting, right? Like, so last year?
Yeah, last year was my first meet. I was the Pioneer Open, and I also did in October, I did the Clash of Barbarians. So I've done 2 meets. So this will be my 3rd meet. And, it's funny, growing up, I always thought it was amazing to see these guys doing these monster lifts. And, I didn't get into it till I was in my 40s. So So I lifted early on. And obviously, I played football and that kind of stuff growing up. And they, of course, they had us in the weight room, and we were doing the stronger program. It was 5x5, 3x5 stuff, and I was decently strong.
You were what?
I was decently strong. I wasn't setting any records or anything, but I could bench 400 pounds. I could squat. Not very much back then. I think the best I ever squatted was 425 pounds. And so it was, my friends would tease me and say my bench is almost as good as my squat. So totally different now. My squat is my best lift now.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I totally, unfortunately, I can relate to that. I got over obsessed with the bench pressing in high school, and I did train some of the other stuff, but it was always like every time I would go back to start training again, I had that, like, bench is the first one, of course.
Yeah.
And so, like, that stayed up pretty high, even though I did not train for, like, I've trained consistently maybe 2.5 years out of the last 12 years. Like, very inconsistently, very little. Like, I trained hardcore when I was like 15 to 17, and then just kind of let it go. The appetite didn't go away, but the training went away. And so I ballooned up another 40, 50 pounds up until 20. And then I've kind of been like hovering between 270 and 300 pounds since like 2014 or so, and I'll
Okay.
kind of get down a little bit and go back up and get down, but not just not consistent lifting, not consistent anything until very recently. It wasn't even something I considered doing competitively, just because I didn't have the consistency. I knew I wouldn't show up enough to like do my best, and so it felt, it wouldn't have made sense to go 20% and then show up and just get 10th place or something like that. It just
sure. Well, trust me, we've all been there. We've all been there. So I was, I think I trained pretty heavily from 16 all the way to 19, and oddly enough, the strongest I ever was outside of high school. So I peaked late, but the time I was 19, I could squat about 500, and I could bench 410 pounds, and I didn't ever deadlift, so I have no idea what I could have deadlifted. I did do power.
Yeah, in high school at 17 was. Oh, you broke up for a second there, but you can continue. Sorry.
I got you. So, my power clean was like 315 pounds, the best I ever did, but it was terrible form. It was straight muscling it up. I did not have good form. But, and then I went on a mission for my church for a couple of years. I served over in Des Moines, Iowa, and came back home, and I had gotten really overweight. I think I was I left around 200 and I think it was about 220 when I left, and I was very fit, and came back about 255 pounds, and it was all fat. I went back into the gym for the first time in 2 years, and I tried to bench, and the best I got was 225 for a single. So I'd lost.
Dang. That's a humbling. Those are humbling days when you go back and you're like, wow, I'm here. All right, well, let's get after it then.
Yeah.
So what was the transition for you then to go from being a filthy casual to a competitor? It's quite a transition. So
yeah. Really, I was looking to make a change in my life. I stayed pretty active, stayed pretty fit until I got married. And once I got married, I stopped working out completely. And not because it was a bad marriage. It was great. It's been a great marriage. My wife and I have been married for 20 years. But we had 5 children, and I was the sole breadwinner because I didn't want my wife to have to go to work. Now, if she had wanted, obviously, she could have. But I didn't want her to have to. She wanted to be a mom. We both thought that was really important for her to be there with the children. And it's something that, frankly, that's what she wanted to do. And so I worked like a dog, started up a business, and I put the weight on. So in fact, the heaviest I got up to was 375 pounds was the heaviest.
That's solid. That's solid.
Yeah,
and how tall are you?
I'm 43. So
no, tall, not old. How tall are you?
I'm 6'1".
6'1". Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, 375. That's pretty heavy.
I was a big boy. So, and I would lose weight often. I'd lost all of it like 3 different times, but it was through very extreme diets and nothing that was sustainable, nothing that was going to be healthy and be long term. And of course, I'd gain it all back, and every time I gained it back, I'd gain more. And so I had done that all the way up till I was 39 years old, and we were spending Christmas up in Utah with her family, and I literally spent. We did like this little some training shoots for the place I worked, and I was doing. I started a company called Zero Res, and we're a carpet cleaning company, and our specialty is not use soaps, detergents, and toxic chemicals, and we leave absolutely nothing behind, so the spots don't reappear and don't reattract dirt. And so I was doing a bunch of training videos for the franchise company, and for a couple of days, and I hadn't been on a truck in like 10 years. And I was hauling hose up and down, cleaning carpet. And after those 2 days of doing that shoot, I spent the entire week and a half in bed. I couldn't even get out of bed. I was so exhausted. And I'm heading back to Texas, and I realized I didn't do anything with my family I'm sitting in the airport, by myself, getting ready to head back. I got to go back to work. I said, I just spent 2 weeks and I didn't do anything or create any memories for my kids or my wife. And I said, I can't do this. I cannot do this anymore. And my sister had found a diet, and it's called Carb Night. And it's you eat basically ketogenic throughout the week. So it's high fat content, but needs to be good fats. Very little protein, not a ton of protein. And vegetables and that kind of stuff. You can have about 30 net carbs a day on this particular diet. And I just said, well, I'm going to give it a try. And then one time a week, so one night a week, for about a 5 to 6 hour window, you can have carbohydrates. And particularly you want lots of sugary stuff. So, so that sounded like, well, that sounds like a diet I could do. And
yeah.
So January 4th, I came back January 4th and I started that diet. And it took me about 2 years, and it was great. It was the first diet I felt like, man, I really like the food. I like why I'm eating. I like the way it tastes. I'm not hungry all the time. One night a week, I can have some carbohydrates. And I did that for 2 years, and I lost all my weight. So I started out at 355 at that point, and I got all the way down to about 285. But in the meantime, I started lifting weights again, and I started looking into powerlifting. And I had no intentions of competing. I thought, well, I would just like to get in really good shape again and get strong. So I found a program that was free on the internet. It was called the Strong Program, and then you can download a 5x5 program, and it puts it on a spreadsheet. You put in your maxes, and then it plots out a 12-week, on a spreadsheet, 12 weeks that you can track. And I did that for about a year and a half, and I went from being able to squat body weight. In a year and a half, I was squatting 600 pounds. And I started out benching 225. I could do 225 for a double. And at the end of that year and a half, I bench 405. And I started out deadlifting with literally just 135, just a 45 plate on each side on a stiff bar. It wasn't even a deadlift bar, it was a stiff bar. And I pulled 600 pounds on a stiff bar with no wraps, nothing. It's all barehanded. And so I got really quite strong, and I was in good shape, and I was feeling good again. And I was in the gym squatting one day, and a guy came up to me, and his name is Shane, and we're best friends now. But he says, "Hey man, I compete. You should train with me, and you should compete." And I said, well, okay. And he was, sounds like fun. And of course, he's a big guy. He's like, 5'10", 5'11". He's about 200 he was at the time, he was about 240 pounds, but he was solid muscle, just shredded to the bone, and not any fat on him, and just super strong. He was out squatting me when we first started, and I was doing 600 pounds, and he could do 645 pounds. And so we started training together. He talked me into signing up for this meet, and then it's away we went.
So what is the process of signing up for a meet? Because I've never done it. So what does that look like typically?
Really yeah, it's really simple. You just kind of pick the federation that you want. There's several. I like the USPA. They're great. And so you just go to the USPA, .com, powerlifting.com, go to their website, and there's a little drop down menu where it says you can join and become, basically a member of their. And I think it costs like $65 a year to join.
Okay. That's nothing.
It's nothing. Yeah. Cost of entry is, almost zero. The real cost is your equipment, buying a belt and, buying knee wraps. And really, even though that stuff is not super expensive, you find great for good prices. And then you pick your meet. and they have a whole schedule out, you know, a little over a year out of the different meets they do and where they're at and where they're located. And you can sign up for one. If you, it usually costs you about $110 to sign up for a meet, and that's how that's. And then you got to train for it. That's it.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, it was interesting because I always knew I had a talent for it. I was a strong kid. I went from bench pressing 200 pounds for my first max to within 20 months or so 375.
Wow.
And deadlift and squats and deadlifts, it was about 265, 285 range. And I did not train those very much, but in that same time period, deadlifted 425 and squatted 385. So
wow.
I was a strong, I was decently gifted, but my I didn't feel called to it because I didn't really understand. One, I was interested in a bunch of things. I like intellectual stuff. There's but also I've always been in terms of what I want to put my life into, I'm comparing myself to the top people in the game.
Yeah.
So when I was thinking about a 6'8" Brian Shaw at 420 pounds, I'm like, I don't feel like competing, bro. I don't, doesn't sound, or, 1,000-pound deadlift. I'm like that would be dope, but I'm good. But recently I looked up because I thought about, because I'm only 5'7". I'm very short.
Okay.
I looked up the weight classes and the relative records, world record holders for the weight classes. And if I was lean and my diet was dialed in, I'd probably be between 200 and 225 pounds if I was like all the way in there. And looking at those weight classes and what I think I could reasonably do, I was like, oh, okay, now I'm my potential feels like it's kind of more in the range of that kind of a thing. And that sort of made it look to me a little bit different. And so now I'm kind of looking at it much more seriously, and having something to move towards like that. Like in my mind, I can motivate myself to do a powerlifting meet and train properly for it if it's like it'll grow my political influence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if it'll feed this other thing, then I'm like, okay, I'm down for it. Until it sort of registered in that way, it was always just like my hobby. It was not anything I felt passionate about helping other people because I'm like, I got into it really deep. I learned a bunch of stuff, created my own little like way of training in my own program. And I've worked with other people, and like I love seeing other people get stronger much more than like myself. And like literally getting my uncle from 225 on bench to 275 on bench made me way happier than any bench press record I ever set for myself.
Yeah.
So it was never something that like I wanted for me for any particular reason. And it wasn't something that I was passionate about in that way. I was passionate about it from 15 to 17 because it registered for me. I show up, I put in the work. It's just me. I get the results. There's no team stuff, whatever. Because I got introduced to lifting from football, but I hated football. I hated the team. Well, I could have loved the team dynamic if certain circumstances had been different, but emotionally and psychologically, I just was disconnected for a second. I was not in a place to vibe with that kind of an environment and handle it well. Once I had school and football to deal with, it was more than I wanted to deal with, so I gave up football and was just like, I'll try to manage school and go from there.
Well, anywho. Point. No, well, back to your point, that's a really common denominator amongst powerlifters is that you find as much joy and satisfaction as helping the guy next to you as you do with competing for yourself as well. So one of the things that really shocked me the most when I really started getting involved with this is just how really cool everyone really was. When you go to those meets, it almost feels, I mean, everyone is cheering you on. There's not anybody in there that wants to see you fail. And so the atmosphere is so conducive and so exciting that I don't care what you've done, what PR you've done in the gym, you could probably add 20, 30 pounds in a meet just because you get so amped up because everyone is just hooting and hollering, screaming for you. It's
That's a
honest.
true phenomenon. I've looked at training PRs and competition PRs with the best athletes, the best competitors, the best guys in the world, and there's that gap. So you're consistently there's that gap. Like it's not like there's maybe one guy out of the top 10 that's kind of like parallel,
Yeah.
you know, who's just kind of like he is what he is. Nine out of 10 that's I've seen that, so that makes so much sense. And all the power lifters I've talked to so far seem to be really solid guys. So I think that there's some if you can get your ass underneath the squat bar and just make it happen, there's something humbling about that, I guess. I don't know. It does something for sure.
There is, but a lot of the guys that get in the sport, obviously there's no money in this real sport really, unless you're, the guys that have really figured out how to make some money doing it, like Larry Wheels and those guys, the strongest, some of the top tier strong guys, they figured out how to make a pretty good living doing it. But for the vast majority of the average Joes that really get into powerlifting, there's not even really money in it. But most of the guys that coming into this sport usually come from a place of pain in their life, trauma that's happened in their life, and weightlifting and being able to achieve and do this kind of stuff has helped them heal and work through those issues. And so when you get those guys, that's what you said, those guys are really solid guys. They're humble and they want to see people succeed because they know what it's like to feel like it fails, to feel failure in life. And so it's just a really cool, it's unlike anything I've ever been involved in. I've been involved in wrestling and football, played baseball as a kid a little bit. And I had never felt the feeling that's involved with powerlifting that with those other sports. So.
Well, I don't know if you meant to do this, but man, you read me like a book. That like I resonated with what you just said so much. I'm like sitting back here like I gotta just kind of take it in for a second. Like that's it's the truth, man. It's the truth. I'm very prone to crying, so I always have to keep it. I'm an intense individual, so I got to keep it dialed in. So I'll we'll move on. But yeah, I think that's very true, and that just makes me want to get involved in the community more. Honestly, like that's so cool. So you have a family. You said you have a stay-at-home mom. How many kids do you have?
I have 5 children.
Five.
Yep.
What's the composition, boys and girls and such?
3 girls and 2 boys. My oldest is my daughter. She's 19 and she just got her mission call. She's going to go serve in Rome, Italy for 18 months. And
that's awesome. That's one of the best. It's funny. There's some people that get called and they get put in Utah. Yeah. And there's like an automatic like, why are you even doing this? Like the community should be able to get the job done, right? Like put them somewhere else a little more interesting. And then some people get Rome, Italy. I knew one guy who was in New Zealand. I knew one guy who was in, I think Samoa or something like that. Like there's a lot of interesting spots. And even like within the US, you got to go from Texas to Iowa and see, a different type of culture and stuff. But I feel like if you go to Utah, you're just kind of like, oh, I know everyone here already.
Right. Yeah, that's funny. So this is funny. So I was actually born in Utah. I was born in a little town called Vernal, Utah. It's just right there on the northeast corner of right next to Colorado. And then Dad was in oil and gas when he was younger, and so we moved up to Wyoming, then we lived in Montana, and then we moved to Texas. And I grew up really in Houston, Texas. And then going into high school, my parents actually moved us back to Utah. We lived in Orem, Utah, which is about 30 miles south of Salt Lake. So I finished.
I lived in Orem, Utah, or I lived in Provo, Utah, for 3 years, from 2017 to January 1st, 2020. I moved to California, back to California, and I grew up in California, so I was right there.
Yeah. So, and then I got my call to Des Moines, and I tell you, Des Moines is the best. It's the most beautiful state. I mean, it's just endless miles of cornfield, soybean field. And interesting fact, their average topsoil is about 3.5 feet across the entire state, and it's the 3rd richest topsoil in the world.
Oh, wow.
And highest producing, even though it's not the top, the best fertile, according to the study that we read, but it produces more food out of that state than any area in the entire world. And they're the largest producer of pork, pig as well.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Yeah, I didn't know that. I never associated Idaho with that.
And Iowa, but 90%.
Iowa, sorry.
Yeah, 90% of that pork gets shipped out to Japan, believe it or not. Doesn't even stay in the U.S. And and of course, you can smell a pig farm about 5 miles away. It's bad.
We just had dairy farms so I grew up in Central California, where it's the ag heavy area just west of Fresno, and we had dairy farms all around there. So anytime you're coming into town, you get the full whiff of it. And if you're in town, you kind of get used to it. But anytime you leave and come back, you get it all in the full dose.
Yeah, funny. That's funny. So my younger brother served in Australia, Sydney, Australia, and then I have a sister who served in Idaho, and another sister who served in Spain, Barcelona, Spain.
Oh wow! Oh, okay. That must have been wonderful. I've heard very, very great things about Spain. Not so much about the businesses there, but I have heard great things about the beauty of the city and Madrid and all that.
Yeah, she says it was
Barcelona.
Beautiful, incredible. Even the countryside is beautiful. He says the people were really awesome. She had a wonderful experience there.
Are there very many stories from people's missions where the average everyday people weren't pretty salt of the earth? Like, are there areas where people are kind of hostile, or I'm sure in parts of California there are places where people are super hostile to the LDS missionaries?
It's like anything, you know what I mean? You can encounter people that are, not kind anywhere, you know what I mean? But generally, and if it's like super hostile where it's dangerous, usually the church is not there. So like there's some countries that they just won't even allow the church in. So and just because they're hostile towards it, and it's not just our church; it's really any Christian church.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, people are good. For the most part, and there's bad apples everywhere, obviously. But some of the best people in the world are, when you look at them, and if you were to pass judgment on just by looking at them, they're pretty scary looking. But when you start talking to them, they're the most amazing, humble people you've ever met. And I can't tell you how many times as a missionary we would go and just talk to people. And there's a couple of times, I was a big guy. It wasn't like I was a little guy. I could handle myself. But I certainly didn't want to get in an altercation, obviously. But there's people that I was scared of. But when I started talking to them, these big, tough, tattooed up and down would just start bawling because they're missing that connection with God and they're looking for it. And the one thing I've learned about people, that we are desperately looking for two things in life, and it's love and acceptance. And it's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Before we were born in this life, we were with our Father in heaven, and He is the source of all love. And when we come down here, we don't remember that, and we are desperately searching for it. And the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ is that you can find that peace and that joy and that love through the gospel and coming back to Christ. So, but that's my opinion. So, but
no, yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you sharing, man. Like, I want the number one thing. I didn't say this specifically when we were going back and forth before this podcast, but the number one thing I care about with this podcast isn't that it's an interesting, esoteric, uncommon conversation, but that it's an authentic one.
Yeah,
that's supreme to me, because I feel like if we're not dealing with authenticity and reality, we're wasting people's time.
Absolutely.
Both in your personal life and in every level. There's no escape. People try to say within a business framework or within certain job context or whatever, you have to make certain sacrifices and change how you operate. And I can recognize like the rationalizations maybe of that stuff, but I feel like you really should. We're all better off if more people are authentic 24/7. And that's where the love comes in too, like that you're talking about. Like that is essential to human peace, to human thriving, to us being able to handle our own existence, is to have that love amongst us and for ourselves and beyond us.
Yeah.
My religious sort of journey was when I was 17, 18, I lost my faith. And it just came from, for the first time, questioning the actual historical accuracy of the Bible, like the historical references that it made. And later on, so it was talking about Egypt and the chariots in the sea there, that they had not been found. And later on, it was found.
Yeah.
Like literally within a couple of years of this happening, it was found. So I was like, well, that's dope. But yeah. It put me to a place where I was genuinely coming to my faith, so to speak, from an authentic and real place. It wasn't what was given to me. It was me taking something for myself. And it took a long time because I am a decently intellectual person. And like I said, authenticity just in my, from an early age, because I dealt with a lot of manipulation and fakeness in my life that was beyond toxic. It was traumatic in some cases. Authenticity was of supreme importance to me in that sense. And so for me, I couldn't say, once I lost my faith, I went back to church and I felt like I was an outsider, not because anyone made me feel like one, but because I was one. I was on the other side of some sort of barrier that had just happened. And I knew when it happened that I had lost something of insane value. And I knew you could intellectually say community and maybe some other things, but it felt deeper to me. So I knew going forward, so what I knew was my previous version of faith was like a little mental prison that I wouldn't think outside of.
Yeah.
It was very, very rudimentary.
Yeah.
And then once you get outside into the real world, you sort of have to start dealing with other things, and it sort of shattered that framework. And I refused to be pulled back into another one. So I would not become a militant, religious, zealot atheist, which is so common. And it's anger. It's anger at maybe their dad, maybe society, maybe themselves, maybe God, whatever it is. Sure. There's usually some sort of anger and angst, and I wasn't going to, that wasn't how I became a questioning person, or that wasn't how I lost my faith, was through anger at the universe or God. So it didn't resonate with me, and I avoided that pitfall. And then just started studying and trying to sort of grasp it for myself. And I was lost for a few years because I went from a worldview to nothing, now having no idea what to believe in. And then Dr. Jordan Peterson and his lectures on the Bible and his broader lectures about stories and the deep divine metaphorical truths about human existence and the nature of human beings that can be found within scripture and story and everything else. Art, it's the meaning of life is what we're resonating with all of that stuff. Absolutely. It's the meaningful aspect of life. Meaningless art no one should care about. But that sort of what made me have a place to intellectually frame the divine truth within scripture that I could then go investigate and somehow have an instinct for how to find the real truth amongst it, so to speak. And it was a block, an intellectual wall for me, because I couldn't listen to lyrics in songs very well as a kid. I couldn't really resonate with the deep meanings or the messages, and a lot of the stuff that I connected with art at a young age was like super shallow, like shallow to the point where I didn't look into it at all, didn't consider any deeper stuff. I was kind of like instrumental and vocal aspects of music was what I resonated with, and interesting lyrics, like I know they use interesting words or like say really cool phrases that I could pick up, like Shinedown is a band that is a great example of that. That I really liked, like the instrumental, the vocal, and some of the lyrics were like cool, but only now, listening back on some of those songs, because it had been years since I had, now I can get the messages, and I can see how the messages were sort of feeding my way of thinking before I knew they were back then, which is really interesting to sort of come full circle on. And so now I'm in sort of an seeking God exploratory phase where I feel like I've identified that up until this point that the Judeo-Christian essential worldview is the most accurate when it comes to sort of divine truth for human beings and the way we should live our lives. I think that the sort of Buddhist philosophy is a great materialistic worldview, like duality in all things, male, female, and I think it's accurate, but it lacks the we're made in the image of God, the divinity within the individual, the valuing of every individual soul. It doesn't necessarily have that. And when you have reincarnation, that kind of, in a way, dilutes that. That's why they have higher suicide rates, because this life is not of as supreme importance as an individual. And I think that's inaccurate.
Yeah, I did not know that. That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm studying. I am blessed enough to have a wonderful Muslim friend from Scotland who is sort of introducing me to the faith, and in the very, very good way. He's an English teacher and very, very well read. So he's the best, in my opinion, like probably the best guy to do it, because we resonated personally. Like, I get along with him. He seems like just the genuine article to me. And so I'm having a good introduction into that. And so when I've asked people that are familiar with the Muslim faith about those kinds of questions, they have said there isn't necessarily that valuing of the individual life in the same sort of direct way. But they also do believe in sort of drawing from the Bible in terms of truth. They just have a different version of basically the New Testament, and then they see the Old Testament as sort of a proto version of what should be happening. Yeah. And so that's kind of where the judgment against Jews comes from, is because they feel like they're like 2 steps behind, and Christians are just 1 step behind, so to speak. That's where, at least theologically, that can kind of come from. So I don't know about that yet, but as far as I can tell, that doesn't seem to be of supreme importance as it relates to government force. They don't see certain Islamic cultures don't seem to have any issue with government enforcing Muslim beliefs, and Christians tend to have an issue with that kind of a thing. So, and I think it's for important, deep down to the nature of reality reasons. And so I'm venturing out in a more deep way than I ever have before, but that's sort of where I'm at.
So I know, like for me, the issue I have with government enforcing religious mandate, it takes your agency away. And God's plan was all based on you being able to choose. Now, in a lot of Christendom, you hear free will or free agency and that kind of stuff. I think the more accurate term would be moral agency. Mm-hmm. I guess define that would be, it is your right to choose, but it's your responsibility to choose the right.
Yeah.
And also with those decisions, there's consequences. There are good consequences and there's bad ones. You make a bad decision, there's consequences. There's really nothing about it that's free, other than you do have the ability to make the decision. Mm-hmm. But there's always consequences with decisions that you make. And then of course that brings in God. My ways are not your ways. My thoughts are not your thoughts. And as you search for him, we're able to help. He helps us navigate and helps us to be able to make better decisions, to learn and grow, whilst yet experiencing hardship and trial, because he wants us to dig down and find out and learn something about it. That's why I love your story. And I don't know if I'd ever look at your story as you lost your faith as necessarily a bad thing.
I don't think God ever left me.
Yeah, it puts you in a place.
I think I didn't know what to call him, but I feel like I was still on the path.
Yeah, absolutely. He's guided you through all of that so that you've been able to actually develop a deeper relationship with him in a meaningful way that means something to you, more than it probably did before.
Definitely. Anywho, I mean, absolutely. I feel like what I feel like I'm on the path in the most conscious way so far that I've been, but I feel like I was on the path the whole time, because I believed from the beginning that it was an individual relationship with God, and even when I was struggling with my conception of faith, we'll say, it's still, I still felt like I instinctually understood the path to find the right way, so to speak. It was with authenticity, with an open heart, with an honest mind, with intellectual rigor and patience. And it was just like, I don't know where I'm going to find it, but I knew I had faith that would come, I guess. So
Yeah. Well, you approached it right, because there's a scripture that talks about having a broken heart and a contrite spirit. And, you know, as a kid, I heard that growing up, but I didn't understand what it meant until I read a scripture, and it kind of broke it down for me. And one of the things with a broken heart means an honest heart. And a contrite spirit is someone who is willing to do whatever the Lord asks them to do. And so when you approach your Father in heaven honestly, and some of that is being honest with yourself about who you are, where you're at, where we are at, but also honestly recognizing that without him and without his help, we're not going to make it. And when we approach him with that kind of humility and that kind of honesty, he's going to help us. And when you have a contrite spirit, when he gives you help, you take it. So I think that's a great example of you having broken heart.
You take it. Amen. You know, the worst thing you can do, and there's this wonderful video. He's not anyone's cup of tea, literally. But Dan Pena, he's a business guy out of Scotland, also coincidentally, lives in a castle. He's a crazy, eccentric, rich old man. You know, the whole deal. Okay. But one of his videos he shows is like, there's one lion who's sitting back, and there's gazelle after gazelle after gazelle after gazelle after gazelle going by, and just hesitating and just hesitating. And then there's another lion that just comes in and just jumps into the bundle and gets hit by one of them and catches another one of them, and then like rolls out of the like pack of them running by. Yeah. And it's a great visual illustration of jumping on opportunities. And this is a different point, but opportunities are a very difficult concept to sort of describe. But whenever you have inclination or something that's sort of pointing you in a direction that you don't necessarily know why, I'm a firm believer in you got to lean into. I say lean into it. Like, you don't have to like reorient your life, but you know, start investigating. Let yourself follow your curiosity, and that might be like I think that there's, when you talked about free will, it's an interesting debate, because I listened to two of the top maybe 20 smartest people like that I've come across, and that was Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson, have a debate about free will. Yeah. And they never defined it to begin with, the phrase free will. And to me, I was like, well, you're never gonna, like, you're arguing about your definition without saying you're arguing about your definition after that point. You have to frame what you mean by free will. And so to me, I think we have free will, but it's within sort of a bound of conditions. We're human beings, so we have a limited range of potential, but because we're so creative and inventive, and because of our hands and our ability to conceive and just our ability to build knowledge with other humans, like, it's virtually infinite what we really can do. You know, with our given capacity, we can create damn near anything. We might not be able to beat anything, but we can create basically anything. So you have the human nature you're nestled with and the limited potential that you have, but you have tons of latitude within that. And then you have memory and the ability to orient yourself around sort of a goal. And that combination gives you the ability to track your progress over time and make adjustments towards the good if you're oriented towards the good, as you said earlier. So to me, like that, and that is captured in the sinner repenting from their sins and turning towards God metaphor, because it's literally the archer looking at the bullseye, and we're all at a different place. We all have different sized bows and have, you know, different arrows, and not everyone has the same practice with the shot, and you can miss it by a little bit, or you can shoot the guy behind you. Like there's we're all in a different place, but it's about that orientation towards the ideal. It's about looking at the right place and aiming towards that. And that's where that love comes in. If we can love each other, if we're all engaged in that process and meeting each other there, we're good. Yeah,
100% agree. I love Jordan Peterson, by the way.
Yeah, he's amazing. Him and Thomas Sowell are everything I'm going to do in politics.
Yeah.
Those two guys are the two pillars of everything that I have a book I'm trying to get done. It'll be an ebook, and then it'll be more than that. But pretty much everything I'm going to be doing in politics for forever is because of those two men, Thomas Sowell and Jordan Peterson. So anyone that has not looked into them, you have to. You have to.
Thomas Sowell is brilliant. Absolutely just brilliant. Wonderful man.
Yeah. And he knew what was up 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
He's 91 now, and he's still writing books.
Yeah, he was writing books about this stuff. Yeah, you're right. It's amazing. Amazing.
So what exposure and interest do you have into sports like MMA or Jiu Jitsu or sort of anything outside of powerlifting and football? Because you mentioned those two already.
Yeah. So I got my son and one of my sons and one of my daughters actually are currently right now in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. They've been doing it for about 3 years. And
nice.
I started with them.
They're little ninjas now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was interesting. So my son, he's always really struggled. He's one of those kids for whatever reason. It's like no matter where you go, where you move, he just seemed to have a target painted on his back, and I just wanted him to be able to have the self-confidence, I can handle myself, I can take care of myself, and I don't necessarily mean getting into a fight, but just knowing that he can do something really, really well that makes him feel safe. And he's kind of on the spectrum. He's not like autistic, but he's on the spectrum. But he's
full disclosure to everybody. I think I'm slightly on the spectrum. There's certain things that are too difficult for me, and I potentially have some head trauma too. I got into some accidents as a kid, had some concussions, so that could be at play as well. Yeah. You never know if that is at play, but I have certain things that are very basic for other people I've struggled with, and luckily I was blessed with a mother who had the mentality of like, it's up to you.
Yeah.
That you don't need medication, you don't need anything else, you just need to keep at it.
Yeah.
And that helped me basically get as far as I possibly could, despite whatever, but I can confidently say there's certain things that are just a little off about me. But it's not a bad thing. It just is what it is, They're small things. I'm not, I'm still fundamentally an okay person.
Yeah, and my son, he's brilliant. I mean, if you want to know anything about any kind of animal, I tell you, he'll give you a 4-hour dissertation on all the different things he's learned. He's a brilliant kid. And he gets hyper focused on things, and the great thing about the jiu-jitsu, it's taught him to be confident. It's taught him to be able to be calm under pressure, because he really struggled with that, and to be able to work through his emotions. He was if he felt pressure or he felt picked on, it was really easy for him to just cry hysterically. It was really and jiu-jitsu has helped him to be able to learn how to manage that, and work through those issues, where now, he'll be on the mat rolling with guys that are way above his belt, and he'll hang with them. He'll put him in all sorts of compromising positions. He's calm, he's cool, he's collected. I absolutely love that martial art. It is a beautiful martial art in so many aspects. And of course, his coach he's just wonderful with him. He's very patient with him, but he's demanding. He expects you to be on time. He expects him to be able to be disciplined and do all those things, but at the same time, he's very patient with him. So yeah, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I'm a huge fan. I started taking it with him, but man, I had to make a decision. Either I'm going to power lift or I'm going to do jiu-jitsu, because it was just absolutely just beating me up. And so
yeah. Your joints are going to give up on one of those too.
I told myself, okay, I've set some goals in powerlifting. Looks like I should be able to achieve them this meet, and I'm going to dial it back a little bit and maybe just spend some more time doing some jiu-jitsu and doing that with him. And we'll see how it goes. But
so I would just encourage you to say, when you're studying, look online and stuff, look at big man jiu-jitsu. Because as a guy who's a power lifter who doesn't have the flexibility and doesn't have necessarily the you're not going to be muscled around by anyone. You need to. So the best person to watch actually is George St. Pierre, because his ground game approach, and this is when I rolled with guys, they said I was very good at doing this particular thing. It's just you go into the guy's full guard, right? Now, hopefully he's not wrapped around you behind. You got to kind of break the interlocking behind you. But once you can, and you're just there, you have your hands on his abdomen and sternum and everything. Yeah. You just push down on either thigh and flip your leg around it and get into half guard.
Okay.
And then you just hold on there, and then you can either go to side control once you have decent senses of the transitions there and the controls, and keep your knee on the abdomen there and the hip so that he's not going to roll out from under you. And then go for Kimuras and Americanas, which is just right there from side control. It just means you grab their arm this way and bend it that way, or you grab their arm this way and bend it that way. Yeah. And once you're on top, you're right there. And most guys guard this way, especially in MMA because of strikes. Yeah. So it's right there for the Americana, and you just whoosh. So that's a great sort of game and trajectory for big man jiu-jitsu. That's
So do you still roll?
So I rolled in 2014 for a little bit, and I rolled with friends and rolled with my brothers. So I have 3 younger brothers, 4 boys, no girls. Okay. And the youngest one is just getting into powerlifting and just getting into being 16, 17, 250 pounds. So we can all sort of train with each other. Dude, so we've rolled a few times in the last year, and it's gonna be more and more and more as we have more time and sort of get our situation dialed in. We're all living in the same city now. I just moved back to Stockton, California, where they live. July 1st, I think it was. Yeah, it was July 1st. So we're just sort of getting everything routinized here, but yeah, I'm gonna be rolling, and I want to do powerlifting just because I felt like I always had something to do there and like something to put on the table. But I want to do jiu-jitsu competitions after too, because it would be fun. It's something that I feel like it's healthier in terms of your body weight long term. You could still powerlift a little bit and stay strong and keep your deadlift up or whatever. But yeah, it's something I want to do more of for sure. But right now I'm in the getting fat and happy, trying to get this little business thingy going stage. I really, over the next 6 months is where I really feel like I'll get dialed in as a powerlifting athlete, and then probably the next 3 months, and then a year and a half, 2 years from now, maybe 3 years from now, I'll transition into athletically turning my body into an MMA sort of style athlete. But I can work on the skills in the meantime just fine, and I'm short and thick enough and explosive enough to where like doing striking drills and moving around isn't much of an issue, and I'm pretty flexible to begin with. So I'm in a position where the skills I can be training in the meantime and just lightly roll and not go too heavy with the rolling and stuff. But yeah, I loved rolling with big guys because I was a short, strong guy, so they would expect all these advantages that were just no longer there. And then I'm used to rolling with small guys who are little tricky, dudes. So I would like get around these big guys, and they're like, "What the heck is happening?" And I'm like, "It's whatever. I'm a short 270-pound athlete. What are you gonna say?"
Right. My coach, he might weigh $140 wet, but he is so smooth and so fast that he'll just wear. He'll just tie me up, try to hold me off until I'm worn out, and then he goes to work on me. So, but I'm just a white belt, so I'm not, I don't think I know anything. So,
yeah, you got to be careful. I injured my coach was a 135-pound competitor, so like he was a little tiny guy, and I was a white belt. I know stuff in terms of offense, but I'm not experienced. So I put him in like a triangle, sort of like I crossed my legs into a triangle sort of armbar position. Okay. And I had him where he got himself fully extended, and I was just sort of there, and he asked me, "So what did you do?" And so I just sort of squeezed everything, and that pulled his inner part of his elbow out of its place, because as a 280-pound white belt stupid athlete that and he put himself in a compromised position, and I cried. I felt so bad. I was so like, "I'm so sorry I did this. Please don't kick me out. Please don't, hate me for the," I was worried that they were all going to hate me at that gym for the forever. But he was really cool about it. He got himself healed up within like 2 months or so. It wasn't too bad. It was just, his elbow was a little sensitive, but
sure.
But yeah, that kind of stuff can happen so easily, and I felt so bad. I felt
No,
so
I
bad.
was rolling with a guy, and we were just doing drills. We weren't going hard. But like I said, I'm heavy and I'm not very flexible. And it was, we were working on getting out of, rear naked choke. And when I shifted my shoulder, it pulled his arm straight and it completely detached his bicep. I felt so bad. I felt so bad because, I didn't
Ooh,
do that. And I wasn't going hard. It's just that
ooh,
I'm,
man.
I'm I'm 299 pounds of solid muscle, So when I move, I just so bad, man. But he's okay. He got surgery, and this is a year ago, and he's 100% again. But man, I felt so bad that it happened. And again, I was worried, oh man, they're going to kick me out of here, like I was working on this card. But no, they were totally cool, and they knew
Yeah.
I'm
And
not
he,
like that. I would never want to intentionally ever hurt anybody in there.
yeah, it
So
speaks to that mentality because, like, I was worried, like, oh man, I screwed up so much. I should have known better. Why did I tense up or do whatever I did? And he was like, I should have known better. He's a freaking white belt. I shouldn't have put myself in that position. And he was more mad at himself than he was at me immediately. So it wasn't like, so yeah, so that speaks to the community, right? We're all like, everyone that shows up at the mat and is willing to keep showing up, like, you're not there because well, I don't know. You have a good mental constitution to some degree. Some people can still be very gifted and get a little bit arrogant, especially young, gifted, talented athletes. But it's
yeah,
only because they're not being put against humbling enough competition
yeah,
in the training room. Because there's always, until you're number one in the world, there's always someone they could put someone in there. Like you were talking about that one guy who was squatting 40 pounds more than you, and you were like, sitting there, like 40 pounds isn't a whole lot, in the grand scheme of things, but you're sitting there like, dang, this guy's strong, So it'll put you in that position. So
yeah.
let me check real quick. Okay. We're gonna be coming up on the 1 hour ending pretty soon. I don't know exactly when. It'll give me a 30-second counter, and we'll
Okay,
just have to go off and then go back on. It'll be
okay.
just the way it happened before. So bodybuilding, you into bodybuilding at all? You follow it?
I haven't really followed it for a long time, but of course, like every other young male, you loved Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, as a kid, I thought he was the coolest thing ever. In fact, I got that drama documentary Pumping Iron as a kid, and
Mm-hmm.
literally, my family teases me to this day because I would really put it on. I would go to sleep to it every night. I mean, I went down to the secondhand bookstore and I went and bought, Arnold Schwarzenegger's modern, guide, encyclopedia to modern bodybuilding. And I would study that like I was studying the scriptures,
That's impressive.
And so I was, I just, so yeah, I was just thought that was the coolest thing ever. And of course, that was back in the 90s. And you had just guys like Dorian Yates and, Kevin Levrone and Paul Dillette and all those guys that were just absolute, just monsters. But I always thought that their physique still looked good. They weren't like bloated looking monsters. I just thought, but it was in awe of all that stuff. That was amazing. But yeah, I haven't, and of course you had Ronnie Coleman come on the scene shortly thereafter. And of course, that's, no one, that guy was just an absolute freak when it came to his huge muscles and his conditioning. It was just insane. So, but I haven't followed it for a while.
So I became a big fan and got into it right as Ronnie was at the end of his run.
Okay.
And Jay Cutler was trying to take over as the guy, and in the Olympia, and it was a great time to be in there because you had two real juggernauts at the top, so it was cool. I feel like if you have 3 or 4 guys at the top, where you just have one guy above the pack